Cooper is a small unincorporated community located in southwestern Houston County, Texas on State Highway 21, 9 miles southwest of Crockett, Texas. It was established around 1900, and by the mid-1930s had a church, a cemetery, and a number of houses. Many residents moved away after World War II. And by the early 1990s only a church and a few widely scattered houses remained in the area. References: U.S. Board on Geographic Names. United States Geological Survey, the 25th of October 2007. Retrieved the 31st of January 2008. Coordinates: 31 degrees 14 minutes 35 seconds north, 95 degrees 34 minutes 55 seconds west.
Tracy, what I know about my parents, I know that my dad, his name was Clarence Cooper. He was born August the 28th at 1908, and he was born to Wesley Cooper and Mamie Buckner, and he was born in Crockett, Texas. And so he was, and he died in December the 10th, 1981, and he was 73 when he died, and he died of a congested heart failure. And so he died, I thought was an old age, but now that I am 75 and he died at 73, he died young. I can see now. And my mom, she was born in Crockett, Texas. He was 10 years older than she was. And she was born on December the 26th, 1918, a day after Christmas. So her birthday and Christmas, they were tied up together there. And she was born in Crockett, Texas, to John Green and Doshi. And they all were in Crockett, Texas, and she died on December 13th, 1985, and she was 66 when she died, so she was really young now that I look back. But I thought I had some old parents that was died, but they was not that old, and she died of pneumonia. They had came to Arizona in the late 30s.
Okay.
So they came to Arizona in the late 30s, and she married my dad, Clarence Cooper. And in the late 30s, they came to Arizona, and to this marriage, they had 8 children, 3 girls and 5 boys. And when she died, she left to mourn her death with 4 sons: Clarence Jr., J.W., Jerry, and David Cooper of Arizona. 2 daughters, Mary Ann Reed and Marie Thornton of Arizona. She had 11 grandchildren. And she left to mourn her death a host of nieces, nephews, and other relatives and friends. So from that we see that when and where they were born, which was in Crockett, Texas. And she was like 10 years younger than my dad. But then they moved to Arizona in the late 30s. And as far as her siblings, and right now, I don't know if any of them is still living.
Yeah.
Right now, as far as I know, they all have been deceased. All her siblings and probably his siblings also. Now my mom, at an early age, she was united with the Church of God in Christ in Texas under the leadership of Pastor J.H. Underwood. Were your parents employed? They were farm laborers. Yeah, my dad, he did irrigation, and my mom, she kind of helped with the fields. She would be out there chopping cotton, picking cotton. They were cotton pickers or whatever. She would even have the kids out there picking cotton and walking down the road with a little baby hoe. Working in the fields, yeah, they were field laborers. They were farm laborers, or whatever they called them back then. As far as talent, but my mom, she loved to cook. She had certain pots. She had a pot she called a bean pot, a soup pot, and a rice pot. And she think if she didn't have that certain pot, she couldn't cook the beans because she didn't have a bean pot. She couldn't cook her soup because the soup pot. I remember once she had a big pot of soup, I know, and she had gave Merle a soup pot with some soup in it. And Merle, she fussed about that pot because Merle didn't bring her pot back. I guess she finally got it, but she fussed about that pot. And she didn't use no Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, and all that. They made all her cakes and everything. She cooked from scratch. Around the holidays, she would get in there, she would bake cakes, pies, cookies. She would feed a lot of different people, like Merlene and all. She would cook up and they would feed a lot of people. And as far as the green thumb, I know she had her garden, collard greens and all of this stuff that they garden. She would cook them collard greens. In one of the places we were living, there was an irrigation ditch, and she would plant watermelon seeds along this ditch, would grow the watermelon, and she didn't have to worry about watering them or nothing because it was the water from the irrigation ditch. She might have had some other things growing out there too, but I remember the watermelon. And my dad, I think he was he had abilities to fix up stuff. He kind of helped with fixing up the house or repairs to be done, and took care of the cars, oil change and all of that. They did their own oil change. They didn't take them to no place that do the oil change. And even they have flats, they always change their own tires. But there was this place they called Johnny Summers, and that's where he would go and deal with. Johnny Summers, it was like a used car place, what you would call it, because you have Johnny Summers looking out for him a good car when he wanted another car, or he would have him checking out some stuff, for him with the car. I can't remember us ever being without food or clothing or anything. They took care of the family. They might not have a lot, but whatever they had, we didn't really, I think we really didn't understand what poor was, because we always had enough food, always had clothing to wear. It might have been a clothing from a secondhand store, from a yard sale, or wherever, but we always had clothes to wear, food to eat, a place to sleep. And back then I can remember we didn't really have electricity, when we were really small. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have these fancy TVs and computers and all of this stuff. What my mom would have to wash on a rum board. She had a rum board and wash it. And they used to wring out clothes and hang them on a line. We didn't have no washer and dryer. The iron, she would have to heat the iron and then press the clothes. There wasn't no electricity. And I think we had a butane tank. I remember a butane tank. And I remember this truck used to come and fill up the butane tank every so often. And that would kind of go for where we had heat, a heater, a butane heater, and a stove, I think. And I think they also had like a wooden stove where they put wood in the stove and all this kind of stuff. We didn't have these fancy places where you can just walk in and hit the microwave, or we had an ice box, and there was this truck, this ice man come by with these great big old chunks of ice, to put into the ice box. People talk about the good old days, but I don't know how good it, when you really think about it, because we didn't even have indoor toilets. We had outdoor toilets. Back then, we didn't know what we were missing. That's what we were used to. That's all we knew. So it wasn't a lot of complaining about it, because we hadn't indoor, all this luxury you might say that you have now, because we had oil lamps. I remember we would listen to the radio, because the radio, we had battery operated radios, and we had this record player where you wind it up, and we had all these records, these 78, 80, really nice records. So it wasn't a lot of TV and all of that, but we had a radio. We listened to programs on the radio, records we could play. To us, it was a pretty good childhood, I guess. We always was taken care of, and we would, like Saturdays or something, we get to go to town. And then I could recall some of our Christmases. We never really had a Christmas tree. We never did a lot of Christmas decoration, We didn't have no stockings or nothing like that, and we didn't wrap presents. But I can remember each one of us had a box. Mom and them would sit by our beds, and then when we wake up the next morning, we find goodies in the box. And we had a secret Santa every Christmas. When you opened the door, there was a box of stuff for our family. It was like somebody had adopted our families or something. I think one year it was like a wagon full of goodies out on the doorstep. Finally, where we were living at was out there off of Lower Buckeye. They finally bought a house. That's the one over there next to Estrella Park. That's the one that you all know about, the house. So the other house, y'all wasn't born. I mean, you didn't know anything. We were all just little kids. So when they bought the house over there, I think that's when we started getting electricity and started having a few indoor things that we didn't have at the other place. We still had a family, though, that did adopt us one Christmas, and they came to the house and they brought a Christmas tree. First time we had a Christmas tree, and it was already like decorated. They just brought it in the house and other little gifts and stuff. As kids, we never did just have a bunch of presents, things wrapped up and all of that. And usually Christmas, when we got our special big apple, big orange, and candies and stuff, it's not like you just go to the store and you can get it every day. I remember finally we had inside water. I think that was part of Goodyear when he bought the house out there. And as far as I can remember, that house, it was way back then. We were still young, and I think he only had to pay $1,500 for that house. Anyway, we got electricity, and my mom, it took her time to kind of get used to a washer and dryer. I think when she started using a washman, she still wanted to hang her clothes out. She said the sun and the wind and everything, they were fresher and better or something for the Lord. But they were parents. They took care of their kids. They were good moms and dads. Said, were your parents involved in church activities? Well, she did kind of attend church. I don't know why. Church of God in Christ just seemed to have been the main church for us black folks. She was involved in church activities as far as I know. And can you remember any funny things about your parents? Well, all they ever drove was the stick shift. That's all we ever had. That's what I learned to drive in. But I wanted me an automatic car. When I finally started working, saved my money, and I bought me a little brown Chevy 2, automatic. And it was, to me, it was nice. So my parents, they would get in there. If they would drive, they would still be hitting the brake, hitting the clutch. No, you don't have to change gears. It's an automatic drive. It changes its own gears. I remember once my mom, she was going to drive it, and we were downtown somewhere. And somehow or another, she was thinking she had to shift the gears. And right in the middle of traffic, she hit the brake. I said, oh, Mom! Oh, my God has just been blessing us. Saved, Lord Jesus. Anyway, we made it. Yeah, that was kind of funny.
Mama was mentioning that her and Jerry, they was getting off the bus, and Grandma had paint, and she was painting the car.
Yeah, she did.
And it was like, why is she...
She painted the car green.
Yeah.
And it was just like house paint.
Yeah.
And I mean, that paint job held up. She did. You said, did she paint? Yeah, she had a green thumb for painting a green car. She painted that car green. Oh, yes, she did. Oh, she really did. They both died, and they both died in December. He died December the 10th, 1981, and she died December 13th, 1985. 4 years after he died, because it seemed like after he died, she just kind of lost the will to live. I mean, she got down to where she wouldn't walk or couldn't walk. They couldn't find anything wrong with her legs as to why. She didn't have no strength or nothing in her legs, so she ended up bedridden. And, that's when we took her in, and she stayed there with us until she died. And one day she just said, I want to go to the hospital, and we wanted to know what was wrong, Mama, what's hurting, but she couldn't really say anything was wrong or what hurt, but she said, I need to go to the hospital. I need to go to the hospital. So we thought maybe there was something wrong, because she didn't seem like she was hurting, But we called the ambulance. They came and they took her to the hospital. And I think your mom, Marie, met her and was there with her while they checked her out and everything. Then we had got a call that they were going to send her back home because they really couldn't find anything to keep her. But then, a little bit later, they called back. One of the tests came back with showing some fluid from somewhere. And they need to check that out, so they were going to keep her. So, okay, But then that next morning, I think it was the next morning, when they called and said she died. Overnight, She died. And the only thing they could put down was pneumonia. They really didn't know for sure, but because of the fluid they saw, they said pneumonia. And I said, and we just said, well, that's why she wanted to go to the hospital. She must have felt her death coming. She must have felt like she was going to die, and she did not want to die there in the house. And when they came to pick her up, she asked them, what took y'all so long? I've been waiting on y'all. What took y'all so long to come and pick her up? Now, you don't be that anxious to go to no hospital. We felt like, well, she must have felt her death, that she was going to die, and she did not want to die there in the house. She didn't want to die in the house. And so, it was kind of like a shock because we didn't know she was that sick, because wasn't complaining of hurting or anything. She wanted to go to the hospital. So so she died, and they said it was pneumonia, but I don't think they really knew what it was because they couldn't really find anything. But she must have felt within herself, she needed to go to the hospital because she didn't want to die there. They're both buried in Buckeye Cemetery, where my My husband is buried there. One of my brothers is buried there. Maybelline, the baby girl, yeah, she was born out here because she was buried in the cemetery. And my mom and dad both buried out at the Buckeye Cemetery. And I have my husband's parents, they're buried out there too. And like Abraham Harris, and you know, we got a lot of relatives buried out there. Buckeye Cemetery was probably one of the ones that a lot of the black folks would use back then. You know, I think it was a little bit cheaper, probably. And then I got one brother, you know, that was buried in Coolidge. But the rest of them, it's been out there in Buckeye. And how many siblings did you have? According to my mom, the 8 of us in all, so that means I had 7 siblings. And according to this, it says there was 3 girls and 5 boys. And right now, I only have 2 brothers still living and myself. Because Marie, my sister, and I was not expecting her to die before me. Because I'm 4 years older than her, and I just never thought she would die before me. But I lost my sister, my friend, my buddy, and I lost my 2 brothers, J.W., which was in Coolidge, Clarence Jr., which was the older one of us. And now I'm the oldest. I only have 2 and 8, both, I understand, is somewhere in the Phoenix area. They're still here in Arizona. We don't see each other too often, but I figure they must be doing okay.